Alright Lars, did you know it's possible to read vinyl records for laser, something like the CD or Laserdisc? No? Well then, I've got something really special for you today. Not many people know it's possible, maybe because there's only one company that makes laser turntables, or maybe because it's rubbish and it can't beat classic cartridge turntables. Let's find out. ELP is a Japanese company created in 1990 for a sole purpose, to make laser turntables. Thus the name ELP, which stands for Edison Laser Player. It all started in 1972 with a company called BSR, which stands for Birmingham Sound Reproducers. As the name suggests, it was an English company manufacturing and selling turntables, and in 1972 they established a Japanese branch which later expanded to selling cartridges, styli, tone arms and DBX noise reduction circuit. In 1988 BSR Japan was renamed to CTI and finally in 1990 to ELP. ELP is not the first company that was developing laser turntables. The very first laser turntable was made much earlier by Finial Technologies in the US. It was mainly this bloke, Robert Stoddart, who right after graduation in 1983 founded the Finial company to create a laser turntable. Not to manufacture, but to create, at least that was the main drive for him. He was later joined by Robert Stark, who designed high-speed servo and analog processing systems. It took 7 long years and about $20 million in investments, and the basic prototype was born. Finial's lack of experience and money forced them to contact major Japanese audio firms and ask for cooperation in manufacturing the turntable. However, it was an era of CDs and all of the major firms were focused that way and didn't care about old, useless, outdated vinyl records. The only firm interested in this sort of cooperation was, of course, ELP or CTI at the time. Long story short, they agreed on some sort of cooperation. ELP didn't start making new turntables using Finial's technology, but rather updated and refined the Finial's prototype. The design is simple. I'm a sucker for a simple design. However, there's simple and there's simple. The ELP is a rather ugly, cheap-looking, huge machine. This Minga won't win any beauty contest. Putting it next to the PSX9, it's like parking the Lada Riva next to the E-Type. Let's hope it's not as horrible as the Lada function-wise. Button placement is not very intuitive, neither the descriptions. ELP could have put more thought into that. I'll go over buttons later on. There's not much at the back. You've got a large heatsink there, and depending on the version, either line out or phono out. ELP also released and updated models which look awesome. This design I fancy. There's another updated model which is still in production and you can buy it new, and ELP, for some reason, returned to the original ugly design. It's a similar technology to the CD, but unlike the CD, which uses one laser to read a disc, the ELP uses 5 lasers. 2 lasers read a groove, another 2 lasers read a groove edge to compensate for any groove damage, and the 5th laser checks a disc thickness and tries to make up for any warpage. Unlike the CD, the ELP is completely analog. People usually assume it's digital because there's a laser involved, but it works pretty much the same way as a cartridge. Instead of a stylus wiggling about a groove, converting the wiggles into electrical signal, a light wiggles about and converts reflections into the electrical signal. When a classic turntable plays a record, you can hear a faint sound coming out of the cartridge, and it's the same in this case. Let's put the mic near it and have a listen. There are essentially 4 generations, each generation has 3 models. The first generation models are called LT1LA, LT1XA and LT2XA. They look pretty much identical. Couple of years later, ELP released quote-unquote new models, LT1LRC, LT1XRC and LT2XRC. They were supposed to be better in terms of sound quality, but I reckon they were just the same thing but with remote control. Then there's third generation, which looks much better. LT1 LNP, 1X NP and 2X NP. Don't know what NP stands for, maybe new product, don't know, but these look astounding. Since 2018 there's a fourth generation, which is basically the refreshed first gen that you can still buy new today. There's only two models, called LT Basic and LT Master. The design is the same as the first gen, as well as the specs. There are two versions for each model, with an integrated phono preamp or without it. The version without the preamp needs the same type of preamplification as an MM cartridge, so you can use pretty much any preamplifier, integrated amplifier or receiver. I'd love to get the version with the preamp to compare the sound quality with something like this or this. Other than that, all models are practically the same with just two minor differences. The 1L can read only 33 and 45 RPM records, while the 1X and 2X can also read 78 RPM shellacs. And the second difference is the 1L and 1X can take 7, 10 and 12-inch records, while the 2X also 8, 9 and 11. Even though these differences are minuscule and for vast majority of people useless, the price difference is mental. The 1L cost $13,500 in 2000, which is about $25,500 nowadays, and 1X cost $7,000 more. What for? Just to be able to play records that nobody has or uses anymore. Speaking of a high price, I'd expect a little bit better made manual and not just a couple of pages printed on a cheap laser printer and stapled together. Compared to an ordinary turntable, this one has lots of perks. You can easily skip tracks without touching the turntable, you can just use the remote. If you don't fancy some tracks on a record, you can program which ones will be played and in what order. Vibrations shouldn't affect the playback. There's absolutely no rumble. Since there's no tone arm, there's no skating, and both channels are as loud as they should be, you won't get one channel lower than the other. That being said, channel separation is as good as it gets, the only limit is the vinyl record itself. Unlike a stylus, laser can read every single bit of a groove, so the details should be unmatched. And yes, some people buy turntables because lifting and dropping a tone arm is sort of a part of the listening experience, but others see it as a necessary evil owning a turntable, and the ELP may be for the latter. Everything is not just lasers and unicorns though. Unlike a stylus, the laser reads everything in a groove, and I mean everything including dust and shit. A physical stylus can push some dust particles aside and not register them as a sound. The laser can't do that, obviously, and if the record is not impeccably clean, you get more clicks and pops than a full cinema of idiots with popcorn. Another problem is the turntable can read only black vinyl records, at least that's what ELP claims, I'll test it later on. What's quite interesting is ELP keeps information about every single customer, so if whatever happens to their turntable, ELP knows who it is, what sort of turntable they've bought, and what to do in case of some failure. And it's a very expensive machine, but you pay for exclusivity because every unit is handmade. Now let's go over the controls. To turn the turntable on, first you have to flip this switch, which puts the turntable in some sort of sleep mode, and then you have to press power button to wake her up. Open close does the same thing, but also ejects this huge tray. There's a kind of adapter inside. This one is for 12-inch records. To play 7-inch records with a larger center hole, you have to switch the adapter, which I don't have unfortunately. After a record is in, the turntable scans the record and shows on a display general layout of the record, how many tracks there are and how long they are, approximately. Pause and play are self-explanatory, these buttons are exactly what you reckon they mean, maybe except for the play button which also turns on a loop. Pressing the play button more times makes the record loop. There are 5 modes. Pressing the play button twice, a record plays twice, pressing it thrice, it plays thrice, 4 times plays 4 times, and 5 times is an infinite loop. These are clear: previous track, rewind, fast forward, and next track. This button, however, I've got no idea why it's even here. All it does is repeats one groove over and over again. I've no idea what this can be used for. With the RPM, minus and plus buttons, you select the RPM. On the 1L it's 33 or 45, the 1X and 2X at 78 RPM. The description is not entirely accurate because it's also used to select record size 7, 10 or 12 inch on 1L and 1X, the 2X model being the best. You can also select 8, 9 and 11 inch record, which I've never seen in my life. Another use for the perfectly described RPM button is to play about with a system called VSO, Variable Scanner Offset System. Holding down the RPM button for a couple of seconds enters this mode, which you can use when a record skips. You can fine-tune the laser position to stop it from skipping. It tilts the laser lens to read a groove from a slightly different angle. Minus and plus is to either select size or fine-tune speed, something like pitch on a classic turntable. When you're playing about with the VSO, it's tilting the laser. Select, enter and clear are for setting up a playlist. Select selects a track, you can see it flashing on the display here. Enter confirms the selection. If you press the enter twice, it will add the track twice to the playlist, and clear clears the selection. Let's have a look how it goes. This is a bit sped up, of course. ELP claims the turntable is good for scratched and warped records. I've got some heavily scratched records that skip like crazy using a cartridge, so it's basically unplayable. It won't get beyond the first track. Of course, the ELP won't play completely destroyed parts of a groove. The turntable can't reconstruct the groove, it's not a CD, but it works pretty well with heavily damaged ones, much better than a stylus. This is how ELP explains what happens there. The laser basically goes around the scratch and it works, apparently. With warped records, not so much though. I've got some records that are very slightly warped, where ordinary turntable has absolutely no problem with, and one side usually played fine, while the other side gave me an error. And as it usually is when I was testing it, the error came up every single time, but when I started filming, it worked perfectly fine. Anyway, it never happens with a classic turntable. Stylus and tone arm are just traveling up and down and happily extracting what's in a groove. Vibrations is what scares everyone with a classic turntable. It has to be properly damped to isolate the turntable from the environment. The same goes for a tone arm. There's no such thing as vibrations with the ELP. I was trying to simulate Japan with all sorts of earthquakes and absolutely no skipping or any sort of errors in playback whatsoever. The rumble is not a thing either, you just get error-free output out of the ELP. Now, the most important aspect of any hi-fi device, the sound. When I was buying the turntable, I wasn't expecting much from her. I thought she's not gonna sound very good and, well, she actually sounds bloody brilliant. Highs are very crisp, but not ear-piercing. Mids are unbelievably pleasant, incredibly smooth and silky, where the ELP lacks a bit is the bass department. She's not as bassy as my cartridges, so the sound is not as punchy, but details are unmatched. The laser can dig up all the information from the groove, including some information you may not fancy very much. Sure, she sounds brilliant, but, and it's a huge but, records have to be impeccably clean, otherwise the turntable plays back every single piece of filth it digs up from a groove, and if you live in a dusty area, playing a record may not be as enjoyable as it should. Simple carbon brush is quite enough for a cartridge, but it's far cry from enough for the laser. I had to wet clean a record to make it somewhat listenable. I always thought an ultrasonic cleaner was an overkill because brush or wet clean always produce experience without clicks and pops with cartridges, but it's rather necessary here. This is brush cleaned first couple of seconds of a record. ELP is well aware of that, and for every sort turntable packs in the VPI vinyl cleaner. Or at least they used to.
Move the brush out of the way.
I was also wondering if the ELP can play quadraphonic records. I've got some quadraphonic records. You of course need an amplifier that's able to decode the signal, and you need 4 loudspeakers. Long story short, it works like a charm. Since the ELP uses a laser, which is the light, it needs a proper surface to work properly, similar to a CD laser which needs a reflective surface. Nowadays it's quite popular to make vinyl records from all sorts of materials. They can be colored, transparent, you can even have a picture on it. ELP claims the laser reads only a black vinyl. I was wondering if it's true or not. First, I've tested this. It's a soundtrack from Doom from 1993, and if you look at the record against a light source, not only it looks brilliant, but as you can see it's a little bit transparent unlike a standard record, and it's dark red, far cry from black. Now let's try and put it in and see what happens. It reads the Doom vinyl perfectly fine, there's no problem during the entire disc, so a record doesn't have to be black after all, but how about something a little bit more transparent? This is a special Japanese print on a special blend material called Everclean. It was produced by Toshiba in 60s and 70s only in Japan, and unlike the normal vinyl, the Everclean is less prone to static, so it doesn't collect dust. Some say it's got a better sound quality, which I can't agree or disagree on. However, there's one little problem with these prints. They wear down a lot faster than a standard black vinyl, so they would be a perfect candidate for a turntable that doesn't touch a surface of a record and is very bad at handling dust. So let's put it in and... nothing. It says HSAT, which according to the manual means high saturation. It doesn't mean anything to me, but the manual says you should check if the record is black and not transparent, so this record is a no-no. Then I've got some new releases that are not made of Everclean, even though they look quite similar. After the Everclean record, I wasn't expecting much, and I was right, none of them worked, exiting with the same error message. And lastly, I wanted to test a picture vinyl, which is basically a normal vinyl with a paper layer with printed picture on top and then a layer of clear plastic on top of that which contains grooves. Obviously you can't see through the record, but the top layer is transparent, so the laser may have a problem with that. And the same error. So, some not completely transparent records may work, such as Doom soundtrack, but see-through and picture vinyls do not. So let's wrap this up with pros and cons. Brilliant sound quality, clear highs, silky smooth mids, unsurpassed stereo separation. Records are not read by a physical stylus, so there's literally no wear to a record by playing it. Unlike a stylus which can't read everything in a groove, the laser can, which makes it a lot more detailed. The laser won't wear down like a stylus, so the sound is consistent, until the laser dies completely. There's no rumble or background noise whatsoever. Damaged or worn out records still sound excellent to some extent. There's no skating, so both channels sound exactly as they should. Channel separation is as good as what's on a record, no cartridge can best it. You don't have to use protractors, testing tracking force, etc. That being said, the inner groove distortion is non-existent. You can skip tracks with a push of a button, you can program track order, etc. Speaking of pushing of a button, you've got a wireless remote. Now cons. Bass is a bit worse. Not really a con, but certainly worse than some cartridges. A stylus can't read everything in a groove, the laser on the flip side can, including dust and shit. A physical stylus can push some dust particles aside and not register them as a sound. The laser can't do that, and if a record is not impeccably clean, you get quite poppy, clicky experience. The problem with the ELP turntables is exactly the same as with any other CD player, a laser pickup. It's an older machine and it's just a matter of time when its lasers stop working and you're done. I've contacted ELP and asked if it's possible to buy a new laser in case of failure, and their response was, well, expectable. If you want the turntable fixed or serviced, you have to send it to Japan. I very much doubt you can find some new old stock over on eBay, at least I didn't when I tried. On a classic turntable, you can just simply replace a cartridge. The ELP can't read transparent and picture vinyl records to some extent. If you have some of those and want to listen to them, you need a second turntable. The thing is bloody ugly, you don't want it at your home. If you're thinking about getting one, get the NP model. And finally, the price is not exactly friendly. Is the ELP worth the money then? Well, they've got certainly more pros than cons. However, I wouldn't pay full asking price for a new unit, it's too pricey. You can find second-hand ones for about £3,000, which is acceptable, not optimal though. Before I get to the giveaway, I've recorded a couple of tracks with the turntable for you to listen to, which can't be posted here on YouTube, so you can download them as a FLAC. The links are in the description. When I was making the video, I tested the turntable with the Doom soundtrack, and I've got one spare record here. It's sealed, and I thought, why not make one of my subscribers' Christmas a little bit better? In an upcoming video, I'm gonna use some random generator thing to decide who's gonna get the record. The rules are simple, just be a subscriber here on YouTube, write some sensible comments under this video, and that's it. Oh yeah, and the comments must include something about Doom vinyl, and that's it.